Welcome to the Ambient iPad. In this video, I'm going to use the Mellotron to take the Boss RE-202 Space Echo to the edge of self-oscillation. The signal chain is the Mellotron M4000D Mini. Its master mono analog output goes into a Boss volume pedal on the floor. The output from the volume pedal goes into the Space Echo, and the stereo output from the Space Echo goes into a Universal Audio Volt 276 interface that communicates back and forth with the iPad Pro. So I've got a pretty straightforward setup in AUM, which I use for the Mellotron, and I'm not really going to be using a lot of these different apps, but I'll walk through that. I've got the RE-202 Space Echo set up, and I'll kind of show a screenshot of that for a while so you can see the settings that I'm using. Because I've used this a lot for sound down sound and just playing around with it, I have a pretty good feel for how you can really push up against that wall of self-oscillation without it getting out of control. It's about anywhere between 1 o'clock and 2 o'clock, depending on some of the other settings and the sound sources, but I'll walk a little more through the settings on this one when we get to demonstrate. First, let me talk about the Mellotron sounds I'm going to be using. I'll be using two sounds from the from the Chamberlin Music Master, 3 violins, which is also a Mellotron sound, as well as the flute. They're similar to the Mellotron sounds. I mean, they are the original tapes, and oftentimes Mellotron just licensed those, so they're a couple of generations removed. And then I'm using a couple of sounds from the Mellotron M400, which is the cello, and we'll start off with that. And then I might use the 8-voice choir. I haven't really decided yet. Let me first play the Mellotron sounds just straight, and then I'll talk about how the AUM setup is. We'll talk about the Space Echo, and we'll just get into this. All right. Clear, no effect, Mellotron sounds. Let me turn everything off here. What I am going to leave on, though, is I do have a limiter and a high-pass filter set to essentially roll off the lows at about 100 hertz, so I'll just leave those on. All right, so here's 3 violins. Classic sound, but as I've mentioned many times before, the Chamberlin sounds are typically of a higher quality, and I think you can hear that there. Flute. Has a little more mid-rangey, woody quality than the Mark II flute, which is the famous flute. Let's then move over to the M400, and we've got the cello. And then again, I may use the 8-voice choir. All right, let's go back to the cello since that's what I'm going to start with. I'm going to turn on the different sounds that I have going in the apps for AUM. I've got Mixbox. I'm only using that right now. This is a full Mellotron setting. So I can just use Mixbox with the Mellotron, but for this particular jam, I'm just going to have the compression on, so we're using Mixbox as a compressor. Turn that on. I'm just going to ignore the other stuff. I am using Blackhole as the reverb. It's huge, but if you notice the mix knob, I've got it down to 15. It's just a little bit. It just opens up the space a lot without it getting crazy. And particularly since it's really I'm going to be relying a lot on the Space Echo, that's going to be adding reverb itself, not just because it has reverb on it, but also delay just gives the psychoacoustic impression of reverb as well. Let's turn that on. That's what this sounds like with the cello. Just a little bit, and let me do it off so you can hear. And one more time. So you can hear there. Let me just open that up. Then we've got Spatializer, of course. Let me turn that on. Let me enable that. Which it's just making the stereo field a little wider and a little more depth. I've got it set to 60%. Turn it off. So you can hear the difference there. All right, so those are the effects. I'm just going to leave those up, leave those on. Let me turn on the space echo, and you can kind of hear what I'm planning on doing here. And I do want to walk through the heads because I do change the heads during this jam. So let me just kind of... So you can hear that. I'll keep going, but it fades. Now, even if it gets out of control, obviously the intensity on the space echo is the repeat, so you could turn that down. You can also turn the actual echo volume down. I find myself doing that if it just gets a little crazy, but it's not increasing in volume and, you know, squeezing the frequency range and really going out of getting wild. I guess that's what you would call it. So let me move, excuse me. Let me move over to the 3 violins. So you can hear that. Let's move over to the flute, and I want to demonstrate how I'm going to kind of walk through the head settings to get from this really big kind of repeating. Again, you can hear it does fade. I'm actually going to turn it up just a teeny bit. But where I'm going with this explanation is I want to demonstrate how I'm going to kind of walk through the heads to get to, I'm going to go from head 1, then it'll be head 2, then just head 3 to heads 1 and 2. And you'll hear that the, you know, the self-oscillation and all this kind of swirliness is a lot less pronounced in that. So I kind of move up to that to kind of do notes that aren't just going to become a wash and then kind of move back. Let me just do it, okay? So we're on head 1, and it's already smearing, you can hear that. And then as I hit a note, I'm just going to the next head, so you can't really hear that transition. And now you'll hear the next setting will be heads 1 and 2. And you can hear that's a lot clearer. So let me go to 1. Let me just... Actually, 3, 2, doesn't matter. Let me just get this kind of smear going. You can hear that. See, I can hear if I don't... See, go back and forth. It becomes part of it now. See how it's... The tail is just really going down fast. So again, it's kind of repeating, but it's a lot more subtle, which is helpful because then you can kind of do more solo stuff. All right, that's a really long-winded explanation for what I want to do here. Let me reset everything. I'll do the jam. I think what I'm going to do is I'll start with the cello without the space echo going, then I'll bring the space echo in, and then somehow I'll transition, I think, to the 3 violins, and we'll have that going. And maybe I'll use some of that swirliness to then move to the next instrument. Then I'll do some flute, and I want to try to get this big swelling chorus at the end. We'll see how that works out. All right, the thing is still repeating there. Let me get everything reset back up and we'll do the jam. I've done a lot of videos with the Space Echo, both just as a delay, also for sound-on-sound looping using its 6-second long delay mode. And by doing that, I was always kind of coming up upon self-oscillation, even going over it. But I've discovered it's kind of between 1 and 2 o'clock on the repeats knob, depending on what the sound source is and where the other knobs are set. And if it starts really kind of getting wild, I can just turn that down a little. And also, the mix knob or the volume knob for the Echo is helpful because you can kind of dial that down. I didn't really need to do any of that. I'm pretty confident and comfortable with the Mellotron, how to get right up there to get some swirliness without it kind of going crazy. And then by changing the heads, it kind of changes the sound as well. I'll be honest that when it's on the first head, you get a lot of, really is very close to self-oscillation, and I'm just trying to get up to having heads 1 and 2 on because that is really minimal and you can get cleaner notes. So I kind of ramped up a little and ramped down. As long as you change it when you're hitting a note, it's pretty seamless. If you were playing notes and then just change it, you can kind of hear the heads change, which is part of the personality of the Space Echo, and that's great. It was a little darker this time, and to be honest, that last chorus swell chord wasn't as big and dramatic as I thought, but whatever, it was a lot of fun. And I love the Space Echo. It is so limited in so many ways, and the frequency response just goes right off a cliff so quickly. But there's something about the personality of this device. Boss just did a great job on it. So thank you for indulging me once more with the Mellotron and the Boss RE-202 Space Echo. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And good luck with your own music.